Okay, we'll talk a little bit about mining. That was, as we mentioned, that was one of the things that promoted railroad building into the Ozarks, and it was one of the things that helped modernize areas of the Ozarks. Mining was obviously a localized thing in the Ozarks. There are vast reaches of the Ozarks where mining really never took hold, either because you have no minerals or because they're there in such small supply, or because they're so hard to get at that mining just never developed in places. But in the Ozarks, you had three main regions. You had the lead belt of the eastern Ozarks, sometimes referred to as the mineral area, and nowadays we refer to it as the old lead belt because there's a new lead belt where they currently mine lead. It's a new vein of lead that they discovered about 50 years ago, and that's where all the mining in that part of Missouri takes place now. You have the Tri-State District, that's the Joplin area, the greater Joplin area, and then the Arkansas District, which wasn't as well developed as the two districts in Missouri, but those were the three main mining areas in the Ozarks. And it was the Arkansas District that helped attract the building of the Missouri and North Arkansas. The May Never Arrive line was built through the Arkansas mining district. Now this is a map. This shows lots of other stuff. It makes it look like there was extensive mining in that area when really it was really spotty and not nearly as profitable. Here's the main areas, the Tri-State, here's the Arkansas District, and then up in here you get the old lead belt. Here's the new lead belt, and you can see on this map it actually says new lead belt. And the lead mining that still goes on in Missouri today is in that new lead belt. So if you do a road trip out that way, go to Salem and go back in the hills east of Salem, you may get into the new lead belt where they actually do some lead mining today. Just a really quick history of mining in the Ozarks. The old lead belt in the northeastern part of the Ozarks, the big time mining got underway shortly after the Civil War. We know there was mining going all the way back into the 1700s. When we talked about the French, one of the things that attracted them, and really the first thing that attracted them to that area of Missouri, was the lead that they mined. But the major lead mining only takes place after the Civil War. And there were certain mines and certain towns that grow up around these mines, Doe Run, Flat River, lots of these little mining towns. And in that area, there's a town there today called Park Hills. It's kind of right in the middle of the mining area, that part of Missouri. And Park Hills is actually a consolidation of a lot of those old mining towns. There are like 4 or 5 towns that they consolidated into one city and called it Park Hills. And for those towns in the old lead belt, the mining has been shut down for the most part since the 1960s. And so, you know, they've had to find other means of generating income for people up there. The St. Joseph Lead Company was at one time the world's largest lead company, and it was headquartered in that part of the Ozarks. And like mining companies around the United States, whether they were coal mining or copper mining or whatever they were mining, by the early 1900s it was very common for St. Joseph and these other lead companies to import cheap foreign labor. And so for a time in the early 1900s, you had large numbers of Eastern European miners, for example. And during World War I, there was a major outbreak of violence and potentially even worse violence against a lot of these Eastern European miners when, I think it was in 1917, when several carloads of the Eastern European miners and their families were loaded up and were shipped out of the area.
We talked about it whenever I went to school up there. We had like a whole discussion one day that they're actually Hungarians. And
Yeah.
I mean, how you made it just to make it comical was that the Hungarians were basically like, oh, you guys are going to get shipped out to fight in war and we're going to take all your women.
Right.
They didn't like it, and so they just kind of loaded them up at gunpoint on trains and shipped them out.
Right, that's right. It was many of them were Hungarians, and that's how the story goes. And there's been a little bit written about that episode, that it was sparked by sort of an offhanded comment. And I'm sure there were probably issues between American-born miners and Europe with language and culture and religion and who knows what all went into that stew. But the comment apparently that one of them had made, as many of the American men were being drafted and getting ready to go off to fight in World War I, was you guys go fight the war and we'll take care of your women. Actually, I think it was we'll take care of your jobs and your women.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure which one insulted the American guys more, losing their jobs or their women. But that it actually resulted in violence, and there was some rioting into the part of town where the Eastern European miners lived, and the end result was that most of them were unceremoniously shipped out of town. And so...
Isn't Von Terre the mine that's flooded that you can go down in?
Yeah, Bon Terre has the Missouri Mine Museum, or whatever it's called. It's a state park, or not a state park. It's a museum that you can
One of the big buildings.
Yeah. Park Hills has the state park, and Bon Terre has a privately operated museum, I believe, that you can.
You walk down.
Yeah, you can go underground.
The mules or something.
Yeah.
Down, and then you can take boat rides also.
Right. The state park one, they don't do underground tours. I mean, you can look around. I'm sure there are all kinds of liability issues and stuff, and the state doesn't want to get into that. But you can go to the museum, and that's at Park Hills, I believe, where the state park museum. And then the one you're talking about is the underground actual tour thing. And just some pictures. Here's a picture of one of the mills of the St. Joseph Lead Company. And most of these pictures are from St. Francis County. Yeah, I think so, and that's where Park Hills is. Here's the Doe Run Company. That was a big one, and that's a company that's still over there in the Lead Belt, Doe Run. Sierra, that may be the town you were thinking. Elvins. Yeah, that's one of the little towns that went into the creation of Park Hills a few years ago when they consolidated those towns. That's another. But, all right, we'll finish our discussion of mining and this one element of modernization. We'll get into some 20th century modernization just a little bit before we get to Ghost of the Ozarks. We've talked about mining in the eastern Ozarks, the old Lead Belt area, and in the tri-state area of southwest Missouri. The first mining boomtown was not Joplin, it was actually Granby. And Granby's still there. It's a little bitty town down in southwest Missouri, just probably fewer than 1,000 people today. But at one time it was a mining boomtown, but it petered out by the time of the Civil War and never really caught back on after the war. After the war, it was Joplin where the great discovery was made of minerals and especially lead ore. And it quickly became a boom town in the early 1870s. And it wasn't lead ore as much as zinc that became the great mineral product of the tri-state district of the Joplin area. Zinc is something that's usually mined and produced in association with lead ore. And so that became very important for southwest Missouri and southeastern Kansas and northeastern Oklahoma. Joplin, of course, attracted railroad service, as we mentioned. And you can see, you want to talk about a boom town. In 1870, at the 1870 census, there was no Joplin. There was just, a few scattered farms where Joplin is today. And by the next census in 1880, there were over 7,000 people living there. And you can imagine that Joplin was a wild mining boom town. Just all the images that conjures up of a boom town. Lots of taverns, probably lots of brothels. That kind of an overpopulation of young single males. Lots of fighting. Regular killings, all that kind of stuff. And you can see by 1900 it had grown to be the fourth largest city in Missouri. And by the end of the century, by the end of the 1800s, southwest Missouri was already leading the world in zinc production and would continue to do so for several years into the 20th century. And there's a postcard of a mining operation in Joplin. Here's another picture of the mining industry at Joplin, and again, one of our maps. This is a little more of a concentrated map. Again, it's showing this district up here, and there was some mining that went on up there, but again, we're talking about our three main districts, three main mining districts. And we're not going to talk specifically about the North Arkansas district.